turn our attention to tonight's game at Lincoln Financial Field. Scott Grayson will be there. And after the game tonight, go to 973ESPN.com for Grayson's Grades, the first edition, Scott. And we always look forward to Grayson's Grades. Let me ask you first, which guy are you going to have your eye on the most for your grades tonight?
Most likely Carson Wentz, since he's expected to play most of the second half, if not all of it. I mean, he's the guy who's going to probably get the longest look and perhaps be under the magnifying glass the most. So he's the one I'm really interested to see just what he's learned, how he's applying it, and what he does tonight.
Yeah, that would be the most obvious choice there. If we're taking Wentz out of the mix, what guy next is somebody that intrigues you here?
Well, we talked about him the other day. I want to see Nelson Aguilar a little bit more. I want to see what he can do, what he's learned from in the past. Last season, like I said, he looked slow getting off the line of scrimmage. In camp so far, he looks like that's an area that he really spent some time working on with his footwork. I want to see how he does against guys in a different jersey that he hasn't worked against in camp. See if he's able to get away from them and maybe rack up a few catches tonight. Obviously, there'll be some more passes going around to him with Jordan Matthews out of the mix. So he's a guy I'm going to keep an eye on tonight to try to see if it looks like perhaps he's gotten out of that shell that he was trapped in last year.
Give me your take. We didn't get a chance to talk to you. I've been waiting to hear from you on Lane Johnson. I know you just spoke to Lane when you were up at camp earlier in the week, and he is kind of becoming the go-to guy for a quote. He's becoming the face of the offense. I mean, give me your thoughts on how the Eagles move forward with this, and if in fact he is suspended, and what you think they should do if he is in fact gone for 10 games.
Well, there's no doubt that this is going to be a big hit to what they've got to do on the offensive line, which already was trying to fill in some holes from last year. And yeah, he and Jason Kelsey are the two offensive linemen who will speak the most, and they have no problem really kind of stopping and chatting with the media for a while. I do enjoy that. I do like that about both those guys. And they're not hesitant to be critical of themselves if they feel they've done something wrong, which also is refreshing. But in terms of this and what the Eagles do from here, I mean, you got to look at the contract and give Howie another pat on the back, because they get the chance to get a lot of money back here if they are going to move on and break free from him if he is suspended for 10 games. Like you said, the question is, do they stick with him and try to hold him there and wait for him to come back after 10 games? And, of course, he won't be up to speed. They've been through this before with him in the past to a smaller scale. And now you're in the position of, if you do hold on to him and he does get another suspension after this or fail another drug test, I believe it's 2 years, or it's a really long suspension. So, you really put yourself in a hole on how much faith you want to have in Lane Johnson. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch what they do here. And, this is a time of year where maybe they try to find somebody else out there. If they can make a trade, God knows they have, they're looking pretty good at the quarterback position right now. If they look to move on and move Daniel, I don't know that that's going to be the case. I wouldn't expect that. But, I mean, maybe there'll be a team out there that would deal with you if you can get an offensive lineman from them, because, he is a big part of what they're trying to do. And if Jason Peters goes down, he's the guy who you believe goes out there and becomes that left tackle. He was going to be that guy in the future, it looked like. So it's really a tough decision if they do decide to move on from him, because he was up and coming and supposed to be that guy to really fill that spot.
Scott Grayson's with us. We're talking Eagles football. And, Scott, so if the worst comes true and he is out for a significant portion of time, how would you, if you're the O-line coach or if you're Doug Pederson, how do you reconfigure that line with the guys that you have?
That's a great question. You've got some young guys you can put in there that you've just drafted, but everybody had the belief that, you want to bring them along a little bit slowly or more slowly than throwing them into the fire. You're already at the point where you just don't know if you can count on Jason Peters and his health. So you're already looking at that spot potential. Left tackle, big one. I mean, you got to have a spot there. Tobin, I'm sure, is going to get some looks. Obviously, I believe he's starting tonight. And then you've got some of those younger linemen that I was talking about that they just drafted, that I think that's where they're going to try to find some holes. You're also going to look, and this is where I think, Pederson and, and Howie Roseman are going to look at guys that get cut from other teams as you hit these cut deadlines in the next few weeks. Sometimes you can find a gem that just wasn't able to catch on or fit somewhere else because it was too crowded there. Well, that might be a place that now that person is able to come to in Philadelphia and try to help shore up this line. But it's going to be interesting to watch how much some guys may move around tonight at different positions as they try to gauge and get some film on some of them to see if they can play this spot or that.
Now, you already hinted a little bit about Carson Wentz, but Mike put a nice poll question up about what Eagles fans are most interested in seeing, and these were his choices. It was first-team offense, Wentz, Jim Schwartz defense, or position battles. So if you take Wentz out of that equation and just take the other three, first-team offense, the Jim Schwartz defense, or individual position battles?
Probably the first-team offense, just because I'm excited by the Schwartz defense. However, in preseason, he's not going to open up very much of the defensive playbook at this point. I'd be shocked if he did, let's put it that way, especially with several starters like Malcolm Jenkins out of the mix. I'm excited by the Schwartz defense. If that were the question going into week 1 of the season, I might pick that. But to me tonight, I guess it'll be to see the first-team offense, which we probably won't see very much of for very long. And without Jordan Matthews there, it isn't even going to look quite the same anyway. But that's probably the one I would take.
We're talking with Scott Grayson. Don't forget Grayson's grades at 973ESPN.com after tonight's game. I want to get your take. I wrote a piece about Trey Burton today, and I'm intrigued because I feel like every guy who has been at camp comes on the air and tells us about how he has been the best player out there. He stands out. He's, jumping off the page. How do they fit Trey Burton into the offense, Scott? I mean, what have you seen from Burton? What is your opinion? Is this the kind of guy where it's like, hey, we've got to figure out a way to get him on the field?
A lot of people have been concerned about what are they going to do at wide receiver or how are they going to handle receivers. To me, the answer looks like Doug Pederson's way of getting around that is to go tight end heavy. And I would not be surprised one bit if Burton does become a decent part of this offense, because the ball's going to Ertz, it's going to Selleck, and then you'll find Burton coming in to spell a guy, and the ball will go to him. I think that's going to be the way that this offense tries to work, is to use the running game to hit the tight ends over the middle, and then by getting the defense to compact into the middle of the field, that's when you'll start to see it go outside. So I think Burton will find a role in this offense because, like you said, he has done a nice job at camp. He has been catching the ball very well. And right from even minicamp, it looked to me like Doug Pederson had taken a liking to a lot of his tight ends, including Burton. So I would expect them to go a lot of tight end heavy receptions this year and work over the middle. And I think Burton, just by the fact that there's going to be enough balls going that way, will get his share.
How about a guy like Josh Huff, Scott? Do you think he gets a long look tonight? Is that a guy under the microscope?
I think he is. I think he's definitely a guy under the microscope because, and Mike, from grades last year, one of the biggest things I knocked him about was it didn't look like he knew where the sticks were. He would always catch the ball on third down short of the first down marker and then get dropped before the line. I think they're looking to see if he can stretch the field a little bit more with his speed this year. When I've been at camp, that's what I've seen his routes looking more like going down the sidelines. They just haven't been able to connect with him, and I don't know if some of that chemistry is going to start getting a little better between him and some of the quarterbacks. But he definitely, I think, is a guy that needs to show something. When he gets the ball in his hands, he can be electric, but first he's got to catch it, and he's got to try to get away from the first tackler. Once he does, he's definitely a weapon, and he's a guy who you have to worry about breaking free if you're the defense. But he's got to show me that he can make that catch, get away from that first tackle, and make some of these really nice gains. And that's one of the things I guess we'll be looking for tonight.
Scott Grayson's with us talking a little Eagles football. Now on the other side of the ball, Jalen Mills has obviously got to be a guy that they're looking at to do big things. What's your take on Jalen Mills so far through camp, and what do you think we'll see tonight?
I like how aggressive he is, and I like how he seems to be around the ball. I really want to see if that continues against another opponent tonight, a different team running different stuff. But I like the way he seems to be attacking the ball and attacking the player. A pretty decent tackler from what it looks like to me in some of the practices that they've had. So we'll see if that continues in the game tonight. But he's definitely working his way up the depth chart, and he's got a lot to show, I think, tonight. And if I would recommend that he's one guy, fans sitting at home tonight watching, I would try to keep an eye on him and see how he plays that position, because I think he's definitely opening some eyes. And between the way he hits, the way he covers, he could be a physical corner, and that could be something that this team kind of needs.
And one guy we didn't talk about yet that we will have eyes on tonight is Doug Pederson himself. He wants to call the plays and how that system works, and is he comfortable in that head coach role?
Yeah, that's a great point, because if there's ever a preseason for coaches, this would be it for him, because I think you need to see And he's got to learn how to call plays, what it's going to be like here in this kind of a setting, and to deal with perhaps running the idea of in a 2-minute drill. When do we call timeouts? When do we need to get the kicker out there? How do we handle some of that? And that is, these 4 preseason games are just as important for Pederson as a head coach to learn some of that as it is for the players who are fighting it out for some positions, because there's no doubt about it. I mean, games can be won and lost by decisions made and time management. We've had our frustrations with it in the past, whether it be Andy Reid or Chip Kelly. Now we're going to see how Doug Pederson handles some of that. And that's a great point, Pete. That's something that I will bear watching tonight and could appear in Grayson's grades.
Yeah, he is making his debut tonight, and I guess one thing is for sure on the offense, you got a lot of things that are question marks. What about on the defensive side of the ball? Jim Schwartz in this defense, do we think we'll get a glimpse of what kind of defensive style we can expect from this Jim Schwartz team starting tonight?
I think what you could look for is just to see how aggressive some of the pass rushes could be, and I think that's fair to say. They're going to run a lot of base stuff. Well, even in a base 4-3, you're going to see those guys up front trying to get back there. And when you look at a Fletcher Cox, we're going to see how he does inside that 4-3. Look at a Vinnie Curry, who's been making, some waves, and a Brandon Graham. And, I mean, those linemen up front, that's going to be fun to watch tonight, in my opinion, is how hard they pursue the ball with the 4-3 look, and how the linebackers, quite frankly, and they're not going to have Michael Kendricks, but I'm looking to see how this defense, even in its base, looks to attack the ball and the ball carriers and the quarterback, because that's certainly something that's going to be much different this year, as we've all documented. I mean, Billy Davis was very conservative. Jim Schwartz is going to not hesitate to take the foot off the gas pedal. He's going to keep it on the gas pedal and go after those quarterbacks, try to dictate how the game is played from the defensive side of the ball instead of waiting to try to make a play like Billy Davis did with his team. So that is going to be fun to watch tonight, I think. And looking at the front 4 especially will be something maybe we can gauge from that tonight.
Yeah, Scott. And, one guy on defense, Jordan Hicks, Pete brought him up, and I think he's worth mentioning again because of some rumors out there that, Tulloch was a guy they were interested in, apparently, and then Jason LaCanfora kind of furthered that by saying that the Eagles interested in trading for an inside backer. Do you believe that's because they don't trust Hicks? They want an improvement there, or just looking for depth?
That's a great question because, I mean, in my opinion, if Jordan Hicks stayed healthy last year, that team might have made the playoffs. He was playing that well and was doing so well for that defense that had he stayed healthy, I mean, you could argue that I think he might have made the difference in 1 or 2 more wins that get them there. But in this defense, perhaps he's not quite as good of a fit, and I haven't had the chance to see him too much on the field in camp. So in some of these game situations could be very big. I think it might be more that Schwartz is, look who he brought into this defense. In the offseason, he's brought in familiar faces, guys he knew he could count on to run the position the way he wanted it run. Now, Hicks is still very young. He might have been looking at Tulloch as a guy who might have been able to mentor Hicks in a way, almost like Daniels is mentoring the quarterbacks for Pederson. That could have been a way that might have been it. I just think Hicks is a great talent, and I don't think that they're going to sleep on him or think that he's not quite up to the task. I think you got to do your job as coaches and make sure if he's not in your mind, how are you going to get him there? Maybe bringing Tulloch in was one way they were going to do it.
Scott, we've done a little offense, we've done a little defense, but of course there's 2 kickers in camp. There's allegedly a holder battle between John Dorenbos and John DePalma, so special teams obviously going to be under the microscope too.
Yeah, they will. I mean, and those are some of the to me, that's what makes the preseason fun. If you look at those things, then there's no doubt. We all want to see a real game, and we're only going to see the guys who you really go to pay to see for a couple of plays tonight. But when you look down at it in the nature of sports and the nature of competition, these position battles and guys playing for paychecks, I mean, that's huge. And it's these guys' careers, what they've worked for their whole lives. Yeah, I mean, there's a kicking battle going on. I thought Cody Parkey would be the guy to get it, but you can't argue with what Sturgis did when he came in last year. And they're both kicking very well in camp. You aren't hearing too much about them because neither one is doing poorly. They're both doing well, and that's why I think Pederson has decided to let that kicking battle continue a little bit deeper. In terms of the long snappers, you're right. I mean, Dorenbos has been doing it for a long time. But at some point, these guys, the tread on the tire gets thin, and it's time to move on. And the Eagles are giving DePalma a really good look. And, any bad snaps or anything like that will certainly make a big difference.
Scott Grayson's with us. Don't forget Grayson's grades tonight when this game is over. The Eagles and the Buccaneers. You can see how he graded out the players. And, another, I think, interesting battle that we talk about battles, and one of the votes that you can vote in our poll question at Mike Gill Show on Twitter was position battles. And one of them, it might not be a starting spot, but we know the backup safety area is a big question mark. We just talked at linebacker, but that backup safety spot, if Jenkins or McLeod got hurt, then what?
Yeah, that's one spot that I would say they're definitely a little thin at. They're solid at the top, but it drops off really quick. Yeah, that's a position that you're going to watch a lot of guys rotate in and out of tonight. I think the staff likes Chris Maragos to be one of the backups out there. He certainly played the position a lot last year for Billy Davis. Obviously, it's a different defense and different kind of responsibilities for Jim Schwartz. But Maragos is a guy who, with his veteran ability, can fill in. Now, we're talking fill in 1 game, 2 games. That's a big difference from filling in 6 to 8 should somebody really fall down in a big way. So, yeah, you got to look for depth there. I know they're not happy with that. We'll watch tonight to see if, Ed Reynolds is another guy who may try to make some big plays and push his way up that depth chart. But that's one position, no doubt, Mike, that they want to get better at. And I don't think there's any options other than what they got there right now to try to do that.
Scott, a lot of people have mentioned Leotis McKelvin as clearly the best corner. Ron Brooks looks like he's going to start, at least for the first part. He'll get the first chance on the other side. Let me ask you this. Byron Maxwell was brought in free agency. That failed. Kerry Williams, Bradley Fletcher, those guys both brought in free agency. That didn't work. Does Leotis McKelvin seem to you like a guy that they will finally hit on at corner in free agency?
Yeah, I think so. He's looked to play the position a lot better, in my opinion, than the 2 guys you talked about before. And one reason why I think it was a bit of a safer bet to bring in is because he's a known factor. He's not somebody who was playing in a different scheme for a different coach and, look what he did over there, let's bring him in here and try to take a square peg and fit it in a round hole.
Yeah.
Jim Schwartz knows him, and he knows Schwartz. He knows the defense. It's not quite the same thing as being a true free agent where you're bringing something else out there that you just didn't know about totally, other than, it looked good. You're window shopping, and it looks like a nice piece of jewelry to buy, but then you bring it on yourself, and it doesn't look quite the way you thought. I mean, that's kind of, I think, what those 2 other free agent pickups were. I think McKelvin's going to be a really good fit here. I think he's going to do some good things. I've liked what I've seen out of him at times in camp, and you're right. The other side is definitely a mystery, and that's something they've got to figure out here in the next 4 preseason games.
Scott Grayson's with us talking Eagles football tonight, Eagles and Bucks. You can hear it right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. Now, another guy that Jim Schwartz knows, Scott, is Nigel Bradham, and we haven't heard much about him other than maybe a screw-up down in Miami. Do you think they're comfortable with him at linebacker right now?
I get the sense they're just not really totally comfortable with a whole lot at linebacker right now, and that's a little bit scary because, the idea is the guys in the front 4, they try to take up some blockers or pursue the quarterback, and any other holes that are left, linebackers can go shoot the gaps and make the plays. But if they're not happy with those guys or they're not confident in them, it could really put a hole in this defense. So, no, I think Bradham's he's got some work to do for sure. And same thing with a lot of those linebackers. With Kendricks not being able to play tonight, Najee Good will get a start. So you're going to see a lot of opportunities for these guys to try to make some plays. And in this particular nature of preseason, what it is, I think the linebackers get a huge opportunity to try to either show what they can do or that they're not quite able to do it with the amount of running plays or straightforward kind of short passes you'll see in the preseason early on here. And I think that's going to be huge tonight for them to evaluate. But Bradham is certainly one of the guys under the microscope,
Yep.
just like, a lot of the other linebackers in there.
Hey, you know what? Some guys tonight have an opportunity to make an impression. And there's a lot of people on this team that are fighting for backup roles. I think you mentioned Bradham and the fact that, maybe they're not comfortable, but guess what? Bradham knows the system and is head and shoulders probably ahead of the next guy on the list. So that next guy tonight is really going to have to make an impression to hold the Eagles off from wanting to bring in somebody else. I think it's going to be far-fetched to think they don't bring another linebacker in from the waiver wire or some other means, a trade or something, because those linebackers behind the starters seem to be a little thin. Grayson, Scott Grayson's with us. Grayson's grades tonight. Looking forward to the return of them over at 97.3 ESPN.com. And Scott, well, I guess, most preseason games, after the first team is out, you're done. But the fact that there is a rookie quarterback who is the number 2 overall pick playing in the entire second half, that makes this one a little bit more watch-worthy, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's going to keep a lot more butts in the seats at the stadium tonight. That's one thing that I expect to see, is them hanging on a little bit longer than they normally do in week 1 of the preseason to watch. And, interesting to see. We're going to watch what he does. But, you talked about opportunities to make impressions. Keep in mind tonight, there's 2 guys, in my opinion, that had a big opportunity to make impressions that aren't going to be able to play, Marcus Smith and Wendell Smallwood.
2 good names.
Rookie. Yeah, and I think, those guys, in terms of being behind the 8 ball, that's where they are. They've got an uphill climb right now. Marcus Smith, of course, we don't need to say anything more than him, that he's been a failure at this point, and he's looking to make a mark. Without him being able to play tonight, he's just continuing to be an afterthought.
Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN, Scott Grayson. Thanks, pal. Enjoy the game tonight.
Good stuff, Scott.
Yeah, thanks, guys.